AMD, man, advanced micro devices. The stock has dropped 50% pretty much off of its all-time highs back on November 30th of last year. Now is it time, now that it's pulled back 50% from those highs, is this the time to go ahead and start buying this stock? Well, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to analyze this from every different angle. We're going to look at the daily, we're going to look at the weekly, and we're going to look at the yearly, and looking for the clues that might be telling us that this is the right time or simply the time to wait for better opportunities. Yes, 50% off of the highs are good, but this is also a really bad market. We're in a bad economy. We got soaring inflation. So this is a stock that could still see further downside. I mean, I'll probably get a lot of crap in the comments about talking about AMD in any kind of negative way. And I'm not really negative on the stock. It's more about being negative on the economy and negative on the overall stock market. I also want to look at how this performed in other recessions, like in 2008 and in 2000. How did it recover? How low did it go? How much of its epic run from those time periods did the stock give up? How much of those gains went away before it finally bottomed? So we're going to look at all of that video and more, but first make sure to hit the join button down below so you can get all my stock market research each and every day, and click like and subscribe so hey, you can be notified of all my future videos that I do. I also do live streams on the Wednesdays, so there's a lot to take in with this YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe as a result. So let's go ahead and look at the daily chart here, because the daily is going to show some clues in the more shorter time frame, and then we're going to start zooming out, looking at the weekly and looking at the monthly. So first off, you have this big time head and shoulders pattern. It has confirmed, and it took a while for it to do it. I mean, this is a pattern that's been in the works for about 8 to 9 months. It finally confirmed back in March. And then when it finally started breaking to the downside, I wouldn't say it was a significant sell-off. I mean, we went from like 105-ish down to sub 90, but when you're looking at what head and shoulders patterns typically do, this may just be getting started to the downside, especially if there's a lot more downside left in the overall market, because semiconductors have been hammered pretty good. When you're looking at NVIDIA, same kind of pullback. So again, I'm not trying to offend people who like the company AMD. I use them in my own computer. I like them, but what we like and what the market thinks is two separate things, and we can't try to tie those things together. So we have to look at for what the market's trying to tell us about AMD. So as I mentioned, we have the left shoulder, we have the head, and then we have the right shoulder. We have the confirmation, we have the retest of the neckline. Yes, it broke above it for like 3 days, but then it immediately broke right back down below it and formed new lows. So that was a problem there, because what we were really looking for during that time period was whether or not it would hold those May lows. It couldn't hold these May lows, and as a result, it broke down even further, creating new lows. So the trend line is in place. We have a series of lower lows and lower highs. We have lower lows here and here, all over the place, right? And then we have lower highs here and here. We have them over there and right over here. So we have them. It's a consistent downtrend. But where does the downtrend end? With me saying that, I want to go ahead and look at a couple of different trend lines to see where we might find some support. First of all, you have a trend line that goes all the way back to the beginning of 2019. This is going to be an important trend line to hold. We're not there yet in terms of testing it, but if we were to continue to fall, that $70 price level is going to be pretty significant. But you also have another trend line here that I want to point out, and that one takes us all the way back to October of 2019. And so far, that one's being tested and it's holding. So again, you have this trend line right here that goes back to, about the October timeframe. And then you also have this other one here that goes back to the beginning of 2019. So you have 2 layers of support underneath AMD. This either finds support in the 80s as where we're currently trading at on AMD, or it goes all the way back down to 65, 66 price level before finding another attempt at a bottom on this massive sell-off. Now, as I go to time frames that are longer and longer and further out, like for instance on this weekly chart, things start to get a little bit more bearish. You can start to see where, okay, things could get really ugly on this particular stock. And I'm not saying just by me talking about this that is what has to happen. But they're reference points that we need to be aware of in the future if things start to get really bad. If we see ourselves in a market that turns into something more like what we saw in 2000 and 2008 and not something like 2020 or 2018, which saw quick recoveries. Because remember, we're about 6 months into this massive sell-off in the stock market, and we don't know how much further it has to go. So the longer we're in this, the more it does start to seem like a 2008 or a 2000 from a stock market standpoint. Obviously not for the same reasons, but from an absolute carnage standpoint for the market, yes, very similar. And if that's the case, we have much more to go. So AMD, this is a big one, and a lot of people are going to freak out by me just drawing this, and that's fine, okay? My job is not to assuage you of your fears or to give you a false sense of security or to tell you that it's always going to be okay, because in the stock market, it's not always okay. A lot of people lose a lot of money because they're not looking at things from a risk standpoint. And when you're in this kind of market, more than ever before, you have to be looking at the risk. So this is a massive support level. And that means if we were to continue to fall backwards, it would hit us at around $32 per share. Impossible? Yeah, at this point it does. It seems very, very unlikely. That would be like another 60+% off of the current price. That takes us from like the 80s down to the low 30s. And I don't think that that's going to happen right away, or if ever perhaps. But it's something to be very aware of, especially if we start seeing another 2 or 3 legs to the downside on this market, and one that extends into next year. And what's so interesting about these peaks too is that they represent important periods of this stock price's price action. The previous all-time highs from the 2000 dot-com bubble, from when it peaked right before the Great Recession and right before it peaked before the big taper tantrum in 2018 by the market. So these peaks have also been met with further downside in the market thereafter. So with these peaks, they preceded some major declines in the overall market. And now we have the biggest peak of them all, to where it just went from $20 a share just a few years ago all the way up to $170. Now it's pulled back to $86. And remember, I'm going to tell you before the end of this video how I would go ahead and approach a stock like this if I was trying to play the bounces off of these support levels. But before I get to that, let's look at the monthly chart on AMD. You can see even more how drastic this run up in price was just over the last few years. The previous runs in this stock from 2000, 2006, and in 2018 pale in comparison to anything that we've seen over the last few years. Again, you have these trend lines that are going to be very important, that when they're tested that they hold. If they don't, then you have to look at the next scenario. Now, how far did AMD fall in the previous sell-offs? Now, in 2018, there was a pretty quick recovery, mainly because that the sell-off only lasted 3 months from the taper tantrum that was seen in 2018. But 2000 and 2008, which were much bigger market recessions, much bigger bear markets, AMD gave up all of its gains. And so you can see we would go all the way up to like $40 here, 47 in fact, back in 2000. It gives it all back up and goes as low as into the single digits, around $4. Again, in 2006, where it peaked, and the years that followed, it saw a move down to $3. And then it remained flat for many years. And then you had the big run up, a little bit of a pullback in 2018 that saw price come all the way back into the teens at $16. So this stock has a huge history of giving up a lot of its gains. And so when you're seeing a move from 160 plus all the way down to the 80s, yes, it's a big move, but should we just assume that there's no way that it can go lower than this? No, we really shouldn't. We should be very vigilant about how we are managing risk and what we are to do if we do find ourselves trading the stock and we're not right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look back at AMD. We talked about some key support levels already, and we're going to talk about these 2 trend lines in particular that I outlined on the daily chart. So when we zoom out, you can see there's 2 support levels. They go back to 2019. This first one is being tested right now. For someone who might be really determined to get into the stock, let's say there's no talking you out of it, you want to get in at 86. I want to use a method that I like to call support and bail. That means if support doesn't hold, you bail out on the trade and you wait for the next support level to hit. So on AMD, for instance, you have some support here at around the $80 level. Let's say you're able to get in at like $83 or $84 and you put your stop loss below this rising trend line. If it doesn't hold and we get a close below it, then I want to bail out on it. I don't want to hold it any longer. I want to say, okay, it didn't bounce at that level. Let's see where it finds support at next. This is, again, the support and bail method that I talk about. This goes all the way back to 2019, the very beginning. If it was to go back down to, let's say, $66, $67 in the next few months, and it can hold that low, that's great. Then you just continue to try to take profits along the way and try to make sure that you're managing the risk. But if it doesn't work, then you want to go ahead and bail on it. If it breaks through this support level, obviously your trade setup is invalidated. Obviously, this trade setup would be invalidated because it didn't hold support, so support and bail. And let's say at the end of this bear market, it does find its way down to $32. And let's say in this example, the trader finds the bottom on AMD. Well, good job. But you were able to test it along the way. Yes, it wasn't successful along the way. You bailed when it breached support, but you kept yourself in a situation where you would ultimately be able to benefit from its bottom without having a bag hold all the way down below and then to actually profit from the bounce. So AMD, I get it. It's a really, really emotional trade for a lot of people. A lot of people have a lot of money in it. Again, I'm not going out of my way to dog on the stock. It's not really this trade that I would want to take at this time. We talked about the head and shoulders patterns. We talked about the trend line that it's trying to hold right now. But if it doesn't, then you want to start looking at support levels underneath and whether or not they want to hold that. And if they don't hold, then you want to bail on it and then try to find its ultimate bottom by being patient and letting support levels play out, letting those bases form and give you the opportunity to get long. But you don't have to predict the bottom yourself. You don't have to have a crystal ball when it comes to trading in the market. You just simply have to manage the risk. So if you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to like and subscribe so that you can be notified of all my future videos. Look, I'm not always going to say things that you agree with, and it's okay if you just don't agree with me. Let me know about it in the comments below. I don't mind going back and forth with you as long as you're respectful. But we have to have opinions. We have to be willing to listen to the viewpoints of others because sometimes it might actually help you in the long run. Check out my YouTube membership. Click join below to get my stock market research each and every day. Thank you guys, and God bless.